Hi, everybody. This is Dawn Mitchell, and welcome to Dawn of Sports. This week, I love my guest. I have known her for about 9 years now. An amazing, smart, as I say, the kindest, smartest, most down-to-earth woman that I have met. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Wow,
Karin Nelson from the Minnesota Vikings, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer. But you're an even better human, so I can't wait to dig into your story.
Thank you, Dawn. That's very kind.
This is Dawn of Sports. We're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studios. Our producer today is Alex Haugen. Best way to listen to this show or any of the shows you like at talknorth.com as we grow. Subscribe to your favorite podcast app. It's free. It's the easiest way to listen. I want to thank our sponsors, Rudy Luther Toyota, Minnesota Masonic Charities, and Natrium. And this is just another great example of the powerhouse women that Dawn has on the show. The show isn't always about women, but when it is, it's about great women.
Should always be about women, by the way. Because women do make the world go around, Jim.
Well, you think
even
I'm going to
when it's
argue
about
with
great
you?
men, the women are behind
You think
them.
I'm going to argue with you?
Right. Well, Karin Nelson, if you have not heard of her name, you have seen her fingerprints all over the Minnesota Vikings. And I just have to say that. I'm so excited to welcome you on the show. When you look at your title, people kind of get like, wow, like Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Counsel, Minnesota Vikings. People start like it. And I say, you know what? If you want to find a kinder, nicer, smarter, and funny, like you're like the total package, but like on steroids, Karin. I mean, I love it. So do people sometimes look at you and be like, oh my gosh, you're beautiful and you're so much nicer than like your title was intimidating?
I think that people expect, because of the title, they expect a different kind of personality. I think that's fair to say. And I understand that, right? I'm not mad about that. Sometimes I think my job is to kind of break down sometimes those barriers or misperceptions that may come because of a title. But I think at the end of the day, all of us with titles like that or have perceived big jobs in sports, we're also doing a whole bunch of little things, detailed things that you might not expect for someone with this kind of title.
Well, let's start with the big stuff that we do expect, because it comes with this huge, and Jim, you know this, there's like this big balloon of legality that surrounds the NFL. And to be in charge of that, if you just look at it in totality, you might be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can handle that. But when you break it down to, like you said, people and how do I deal with them and what is the best legal course for the Vikings? When you do that, when you break it down in chunks and dealing with the NFL, which is its own different world, what is the best thing that you like about it when you kind of dissect it down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think first I'm going to say when you talk about, the chunks of the work, there are very distinct parts. So I think I'm going to just mention those first and then maybe dive into some of my favorite things. So the NFL itself, right, is a great. So, a part of what I do, of course, is trying to ensure that we're in compliance with the NFL has a lot of rules, regulations, policies, expectations, and I feel a personal sense of responsibility to make sure that we do our very best to be in compliance with that. And a part of that is having a good relationship with the people at the league office that I work with most often. It's sometimes being the person to push back sometimes when the league may say yes or no, or you need to do things a certain way. Sometimes it's leveraging those relationships to say, look, we did what you wanted us to do last time. We really think we need to do it this way this time. So I'm sometimes that voice behind the scenes,
right,
doing that kind of thing. But I think I take compliance really, really seriously, whether that's compliance with league rules, whether it's compliance with state and local laws and regulations or on the federal level. And, during COVID, of course, that was a big part of
enormous.
Oh boy, that was a bear. We could do a whole show on that, but hopefully we don't have to deal with that anytime again soon. But then there's the kind of the day-to-day legal kind of thing. So if you put compliance to the side, football is also a big business. Of course, it's of course what we see on the field. I'm a massive fan. I've been a fan my entire life of this team. And so there's the football side, but NFL is big business, as everybody knows. And there are a massive number of agreements and contracts that must get done every day, every week, every month. And I have a spectacular team that I work with at the Vikings who ensures that all of that gets done. So we get the business side of things done. And then something else I do that's not reflected in my title is that I oversee our social impact work.
Yes.
And that is my heart, my, it's kind of it's part of the reason I wanted to get into sports. I mean, I love the sport itself. Football to me is the most exciting, the best sport, in my humble opinion, baseball being a close second. But what I love about sports is how it brings people together and brings a community together in ways that go beyond the sport. And when you can do that, you have the power to do a lot of good. And I was drawn to sports because of that. And so I started getting involved in our what we call social impact work early on. Mm-hmm. And I was able to work with Brett Tabor, who you probably know, who's a tremendous leader in our organization, and to restructure, to put what were 4 separate departments under social impact. And so we now leverage community relations, our Legends group, which is our Vikings alumni Legends, youth and high school football, and our Minnesota Vikings Foundation under that umbrella. And so I have the great privilege of overseeing that team and that work. And that's in addition to the legal side. But it's so fulfilling and so meaningful.
When yesterday at the game, Monday Night Football, we're taping this Tuesday, when we saw Chris Carter and Jake Reed go out there and support Randy Moss, and I heard, Kevin O'Connell said, I just reached out. There's so many legends like that. When you talk about the social impact, just how the reaction I'm hearing, I'm getting tons of emails and texts and things saying that was the most beautiful thing the Vikings did. And it just seems so natural, but some teams don't do that. They wouldn't think like, oh, maybe at the end of the year we'll have a reunion, we'll do it. But just like in that moment, to switch gears and to invite them to be honorary captains, just the whole Vikings organization thinking on such a bigger level. I know that you're proud of that, but that's what you're talking about. It's so much more than this is what my job is and this is what someone else's job is, to kind of do that next level thinking, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And, we have a whole bunch of people that think that same way, right? Are trying to pull all these ideas and brainstorm together to come up with those things. Now, that was, as I understand, that was Coach O'Connell's, that specific moment that you mentioned. And I had the opportunity just, in the office today before I came here, I bumped into his wife, to Leah, and, wished her Merry Christmas, gave her a big hug. And I said, I want to, tell Kevin, thank you for helping to pull that together last night, because he cares that way.
Yeah.
And then, then you work with the rest of the organization to make it happen. So in our Legends group, we've got Tracy McDonald, we've got Tom West, and then we've got a whole bunch of people who have relationships with these various legends. And you pull that together and you make it happen because it's the right thing to do and it's going to make a difference. And there's countless examples like that. So I feel so lucky to be able to be a part of that. And the legends in particular, for someone like me who grew up watching, I learned football by watching the Vikings team play and watching it through, a team that was coached by Bud Grant, watched players like Alan Page and Jim Marshall and Carl Eller, and to learn, how that part of the game should be played. I could tell by the way my dad, how he just respected Bud Grant so much. Mm-hmm. And, you learn things I learned things about my dad, like, oh, this is what a good leader is. This is what he values. But I learned the game of football that way. And so now to be able to, at halftime last night, I was sitting with Carl Eller and Molly, and I was talking to Chuck Foreman, checking in with him. I'm getting texts from Jim Marshall's wife, Sue, during the game. To have these kinds of relationships with these true Viking legends who really, we stand on the shoulders of these guys. That is, if I had to pick one thing that has just been so personally satisfying, it's probably these relationships. And I love, being a person, not the only person, but a person that helps keep that connection. Yeah. Because they value it. And I sit on the advisory board for the Page Education Foundation, which does remarkable work. And to give the Changemaker Award last night to someone who 20 years ago was a Page scholar. I mean, Alan will say, if he was here, that is, for him, one of the most meaningful things that ever happened, that what he and his late wife, Diane, created, how they have paid it forward and continue to year after year. So it's all of that coming together. Yeah. This is the beauty, I think, of what sports can be.
Well, I want people who are listening to also know that it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like, you're a huge driving force for that, because I can think, and Jim, I'm sure you too, many teams that we've covered, I could not tell you who the chief legal officer is or the executive vice president, right? They're in an office. They don't get involved, and not in a bad way. Sometimes they're overloaded and this is what they need to do. But I remember I had a friend when I said a couple weeks ago that you were coming on, and they said, oh my gosh, how does someone get that job? And it's not like you just get out of law school and do it. You were at Cargill for years. And not only, I remember you and I years ago had to talk about when you were in Russia, and just the experiences, Russia, and you were in, not Amsterdam. Where else were you?
Geneva,
Oh
Switzerland.
my goodness.
And Singapore.
And I remember hearing all these stories saying, not only do you have to be smart, and you're a woman, going to these countries and living for years and navigating the whole life, but also being badass about it. And such a, like, you're so sweet and you smile, but I'm like, she's so smart and she handles this. Like, it doesn't happen in a vacuum when you start talking with Kevin Warren about coming over and making the swap to the NFL.
Yeah.
So I know the life of Cargill and International, and going to the NFL is totally different. What was your mindset? And the transition, I know, is never easy, but that's we could do a whole show on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know if there's a typical transition into a role like this. I think this was atypical for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. But what I will say is that I think when Kevin approached me about considering this role, I think I would not have been ready for it if I hadn't done these other things first. Because I think he felt that, he had moved on to the chief operating officer role, and he had been the general counsel role. I think he wanted someone who was going to be comfortable coming in and being a leader, someone who could do the legal work, of course, but need someone who would be comfortable leading a team and being part of a leadership team.
Right.
And, those assignments I did for Cargill, those there's lots of wonderful things about it. There's also some really hard things about each of those assignments and things that happened along the way. But those are the things that really, you get through those and you just think, I did that. And so I don't know what's happening next, but I'm pretty sure I'll figure it out and I'll get through that too. It builds a confidence that you can do hard things. And Kevin would always use the word about gritty. He likes, to hire people that can be a bit gritty. And I think those 6 years abroad helped build that grittiness for me.
It's funny, Mark Wilf said that to me too when the opening game that was against the Giants and they're in New York. And he's like, welcome to our state. Our Vikings are going to take it over or something like that. It was very lovely. And I said, yeah, I was actually born here. And he goes, what? I thought you were from Massachusetts. I said, yes, but I was born in Jersey. So it doesn't really count. First grade on, I was Massachusetts. He goes, nope, if you were born in Jersey. And then he looked at me and he winked. He goes, I knew you had some grittiness to you. Yeah. I said, yes, never underestimate me. It's the same thing, right? Yeah. Don't underestimate me, correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. And, I think, everyone has a different style about, how that shows up.
Yes.
And I think for me, I just, I don't think I need to be in someone, I can be that way when I need to be. But, I prefer to approach things with a kind and honest kind of way, and I will be, determined and gritty and things when I need to be. But I don't think I have to show that every minute to prove that I can be that way, if that makes sense.
Yes. I remember when I first met you, you had super short hair.
Yes.
When you came in, I think we were the only two women in the entire press box area. And we had a lot of friends in common, which I thought was fantastic. But you had what I loved that you came in, and it's never changed, is you had this genuine kindness. And everyone I know that knows you says that, whether it's the Marshalls, I know that Jim and Sue say they adore you.
And I adore both of them.
Yeah, and these are real relationships. These aren't like just transactional. These are, you can just tell that they are like a part of your family in an extended way. And what I really love is sometimes it's not like that. It's, you can separate this is the business, but I can be myself. There's a vulnerability in that you don't often find in lawyers, just saying. It's kind of didactic for sure. Does that come natural to you?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that maybe because of one's life experiences, or you get to a certain age, perhaps. I have the benefit of having parents who I think genuinely, they're relationship builders. So I saw that. And they also believe in, that you take care of those around you, right? That sense of community, that you look after people. And I think that definitely was a piece of it. But for me, it's really, I just think life is too short to not approach it that way. Yeah. And it doesn't mean, sometimes things don't work out that way. You may be giving and you may try to, and it doesn't work out, and not all people are good, right? And sometimes that can't happen. But generally, I think you can find something in common with almost everybody if you just make a little bit of effort. And it's so much easier to do anything, whether it's working or playing or whatever, to find those commonalities. And that, I think, living abroad helped me so much. People thought it was crazy, for example, that I was going to Moscow. I was going to live in Moscow. And I didn't know for sure how long I would be there, but it was going to be probably up to a year. And I was a little nervous, too. At first, I said, I'm not doing this. But then I went to Moscow to visit quickly, and I saw how it was probably going to be a good thing. And, just the stereotypes that people had of the, friends or family or whoever had of the Russian people. And of course, it's just like any stereotypes or generalities. Not everybody, in fact, most people there weren't.
Yeah.
The people I worked with there, almost all Russians, were incredibly kind and gracious with me. And so I think all of those experiences, you deal with people with different languages, different cultures, and that just, I think, frees your mind so much. And it allows you to, I think, just develop and be open to developing more relationships. And I was there by myself.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It would have been a very lonely existence if
didn't
I
make
wouldn't
friends.
have done that. The language barriers too make that a bit difficult, but you find your way.
More with Karin and Dawn in a moment. Reminder, we have a couple of Viking shows on the network. We have the Viking Update Show with myself and John Krasinski, a writer's view of the franchise. Then we have Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider with the former Vikings general manager. Right now, let's take care of the business of the business. I want to thank longtime sponsor, longtime supporter of women's sports in Minnesota, Rudy Luther Toyota.
Ready for a women-forward car dealership? Rudy Luther Toyota empowers their many women on staff in sales, management, and service. Whether you are looking for a new Toyota or pre-owned vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota has something for everyone. Every vehicle comes with a Luther Advantage. 10 cents off fuel and car wash discounts at holiday stations, Luther Advantage warranty, and 5-day return policy on pre-owned vehicles. Located just 5 minutes west of downtown Minneapolis, off 394 and General Mills Boulevard. And they're also hiring. Want to join the team but don't know where to start? Visit rudyluthertoyota.com today.
Thanks also to another business. The longer they stay sponsoring us, the more I hear good things about them from other people. Minnesota Masonic Charities.
When people think of the Freemasons, they often think of secret handshakes and unusual hats, and of course, the pancake breakfast. Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you think about the work that they do right here in our community. Places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota or the Masonic Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home in Bloomington. They are just a few examples of the important work that the Freemasons support here in Minnesota. As part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, Masons have consistently answered the call when it comes to charitable needs. I am happy that Minnesota Masonic Charities has chosen Minnesota Bound and this podcast as a place to help spread the word. We look forward to learning so much more about their many programs here in the weeks to come.
And now Dawn's favorite ad.
His BFF.
Yeah. Natrium, natrium.com. Also the Wildflower Stores, same company. I have a couple of Wildflower Stores right by me. My wife and I love the sleep gummies. They just help you ease into sleep. But I recommend going to a Natrium or a Wildflower shop. Very clean, very professional, beautiful little shops, very knowledgeable sales professionals. And if you want, there are just so many products, you're going to need a little help, like my wife and I did, to figure out what product, what's going to serve you best, what dosage is best for you. There are incredibly wide range of dosages. Some people are going to want to have one of their THC drinks on the weekend. Other people are going to want something for joint inflammation. Some people are going to want something for gut health. Again, my wife and I use the sleep gummies, but there are so many options. You're going to want to go there, check it out. Then once you figure out what you like, then you can order what you like at natrium.com. So check out natrium.com. Check out a Natrium or a Wildflower shop.
I'm trying to come up with a nickname for you. Like, should I call you Wildflower or Nate? Because Nay is already taken my friend Nadine Babu. I call her Nay Nay. Like, I got to come up with a nickname for you.
I'll think of a list of nicknames I will not accept. Then I'll let you take it from there.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Karin, one thing I really wanted to ask, people ask me this all the time. So to be a woman in a man's world, sometimes when people ask me that, I roll my eyes because I'm like, well, I don't know what it's like to be a male in a male's world. So I can only tell you about my experience. Mm-hmm. But the deeper you're into it, you get the generalities of what people are meaning or trying to get to. So, and everyone that listens to the podcast knows I was raised, I have no sisters, 4 brothers. My brothers were amazing. They still treat me like the best person ever. They open doors for me. They are just fantastic. My dad was a great supporter of women after he figured it out, like there's a different generation. Like, oh, okay, if you want to rake the leaves and not clean the dishes, go ahead, And my mom was a strong woman, but in a quiet way, which I love. She was smart and she was strong. So I've just decided I'm going to navigate this world my own way. I will not alienate men because I was supported by men. I'm not going to be oh yeah, all men are dogs. I hate those people that think that way. But for you, when you have to go from the corporate, from Geneva, Moscow, all the worldly places. Now, the NFL is going worldly, so but that's great.
Yeah.
What was the hardest transition for you as a woman, perhaps, in a male-dominated field? Because now it has changed in the past 9 years or decade. Like I look around the press box and I see it used to just be me and the women who were serving the meal. And that always kind of secretly made me mad.
Well, I think about when I first joined the team, probably for the first 3 years, I traveled on all the away games. And I can remember those flights because it was the flight attendants and me.
Yeah.
And if you you didn't travel with the team.
Not yet. We travel on commercial.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, and the flight attendants were so happy to see me because there just weren't other women on this plane. And I remember that was a shock to me. The first time I got on that plane or being on the bus, the bus to the plane. I'm really glad I did it. I think it was good for me. And I think it was good for the team, right? To see that there are, women who do these kinds of roles. But as a funny anecdote, on one of these flights, it was probably my second year or third year with the team. I'm in my 9th season now. I had gotten up to get something. And, they have so many snacks on these planes, right?
Yeah.
All healthy snacks mostly. But I had gotten up to get a snack. And a player had, looked up and, I walked by and a player said, "Hey, can you grab me a bag of chips?" I was like, "Oh," I said, "You know what?" In my mind, I'm like, there's 2 ways to handle this, right?
Right.
I'm like, I could have said,
the devil and the angel.
Yeah. Do you know that I'm the lead lawyer for this team. You shouldn't be asking me for chips.
Yes.
But I said, you know what? I just got mine right up there in the front, and I think there's some more. So I'm sure you can find them.
For you.
Just something in it, in a pleasant voice.
Right.
And at first he looked at me so confused, and then I honestly I don't even remember who it was.
Right.
But I tend to I want to approach those things because I knew it was the experience that women were not flying with the team. So I didn't want to
make them
teach
feel
them
bad.
No,
too.
and teach a lesson really. But throughout my career, I have worked in I would say male-dominated environments for the most part. So this isn't that different. It's a different industry. But at a lot of the businesses that I worked with at Cargill, they were largely male-dominated. So I just think I'm like you. I don't think there's a template to it. I have found that the more I get comfortable being myself in those environments, the better off I'll be and everyone else will be. Easier said than done sometimes. But I'm just not the kind of person, unless I'm forced to, and I have to, and I will, pound my table on the fist. Or pound my fist on the table. You know what I meant?
Yes.
I would rather demonstrate my competence through what I do every day. I want to develop healthy relationships with people that I work with. And like you mentioned, Dawn, I have had so many men throughout the course of my career who have been helpful and been great mentors, and a couple key men at my time at Cargill who saw something in me that I did not yet see in myself. And that was game-changing for me. And so, and there have been women in my life too, but I just don't look at it that much in that way.
Yeah.
And I think I need to be authentic to who I am at all times. Now, does that mean that I never have a sidebar conversation with people to say, you know what, in that meeting, I felt like I was talked over.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to tell you how I feel. Maybe that's not exactly what you meant, but to have a reasonable conversation about those things. And I find for the most part, people don't realize when things like that happen. But I feel it's not so much just for me. Like this is for everyone who's coming into that room next or coming behind me, right? For people to be more aware. Because at least in my journey, the most important thing was building my confidence along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that partly because of my gender and partly where I grew up, that confidence came more slowly and came later in life. And through big things like I did with these international assignments and those kinds of things. And Cargill, frankly, promoting me at times when I'm like, I'm not sure. But they thought I could. And so they thought I could. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And then I did it.
You never say no.
No.
You just say yes. That's how I got on
Take
air.
the job, then figure out the job.
Just say
Yeah.
yes.
But I think, I don't want to generalize too much because it's, absolute. They're not always true. But I think generally speaking, women are not going to be as inclined to do what you just said, Jim. It's going to be, if you look at a job description and it's like, if you can't do every last thing, it's like, well, I'm maybe not going to raise my hand because I maybe should get better at that last thing. Where, men might be more inclined to say, look, I can do 80% of that. I'll figure out the other 20%. So the question for me is, how do we help accelerate that confidence and start it earlier with girls? And tying this back to sports, I do think that sports is a great way for girls to get involved early that really helps build that confidence. And, growing up, I wasn't where I grew up. There were some opportunities, but I was a cheerleader growing up, right? And I wish now that maybe I would have played basketball or volleyball or something like that might have accelerated my confidence a bit earlier.
It was funny because just in the locker room and also in the podium, I was, asking the guys about handling success. And I think sometimes when you play sports, it's just as important to learn how to handle success as it is failure. Because sometimes you can get overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting it to be 12-2. Or you get full of some people get full of themselves and then they trip over themselves. And you don't want to be too cool, like been there, done that when you have not been there and you have not done that. So handling success, like you're saying, is sometimes you just have to find that confidence, be out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to leave the country and work there. They think I can do it. Okay. It's having someone believe in you.
Yes, exactly. And then doing the work and the things so you ultimately believe in yourself. But I think, I now have the great opportunity to mentor a lot of people in the organization and outside. And it tends to be more women. There are some men too, but it tends to be younger women. And I like talking about this very piece because I think it's so important. You can't fake it. You have to find a way to start really believing in yourself. And that doesn't mean you're never going to make mistakes either. You also have to believe that mistakes happen and you're going to get past it and it's going to be okay. And you're probably going to be stronger and smarter and better after that happens.
Yeah.
And not to crumble, when that happens.
You have a right to take up room and a right to speak your mind. Mm-hmm. But also, when I have interns, your story reminded me of this one for me. When I was behind the scenes at WCCO Radio, I was a producer, and I was thrown into that role because Tom Corelli, who's now at the NBA, he left. And they're like, okay, I was producing a radio show. For Craig Mustard, if anyone knows that name. So it was this radio show. I'm like, oh, I'm now in charge of the Celtics radio network. Like, what? Because someone left. Well, now you have to deal with salespeople, right? And so there's this person coming in to see Dawn Mitchell. And so I'm like, I got to go get him. I'll go to the lobby. And I said, hi, nice to meet you. He goes, hey, honey, could you grab me a cup of coffee? As I'm like going to meet this guy, And I said, sure. Because I wasn't thinking like you can grab it yourself because he couldn't. I had to. And he goes, yeah, just 1 cream, 2 sugars. He goes, he said, I'm waiting for Dawn Mitchell. He'll be out here in a minute. And I was like, oh, he thinks it's DON. Oh, okay. And I didn't know, like, he's a salesperson and I don't know how much money was going to be spent on the radio network.
Yeah.
And also he wasn't being mean. Like, he wasn't being like, hey, sweet. He wasn't being rude, but just kind of like, could you run along and get me a coffee? Those were exact words. I remember that. And so I brought it back. And I said, would you mind? I'll be right back in a second. He goes, oh, he's running late. And I go, I'll just be back in a second. So I got back, got what I need to, and came out. And he's like, hi. And I go, hi. I said, I'm Dawn Mitchell. And the look on his face, because I didn't I'm Dawn. I wasn't rude, you know. And then he was tripping over himself and uncomfortable the rest of the way. And then I'm like, no, I'm not going to try to make him feel better. But, then I introduced him to the sales staff and let him go on his merry way after I had my meeting with him. But then that's when I realized, you know what, Dawn, you can't be surprised. Like, Dawn sounds like Dawn. Like, I can't tell you how many times Starbucks spells my name DON. But the run along get coffee, I was like, oh, that was my perceived role until he knew better. And then he was wonderful to me anytime he came in after that. And he even thanked me, like, thank you for not, making me feel horrible about it. He went home and beat himself up about it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But there are times, and when you said, the fist on the table, I tried to do the velvet hammer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to hammer on that pink pig, holidays coming up. But, some people said, you'd rather be a bee than fired. And I go, yes, if it gets to that point, just don't push me. But sometimes you just have to flex that muscle.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think as women, I feel like we tend to be more aware of that and more self-conscious about it because I think we sense that not everyone's comfortable when we need to do that or have to do that, and that somehow will be in conflict with who we're perceived to be. And I just, we're like anybody. You have a range of actions and emotions, and you hope to use them in the appropriate way. But it shouldn't be shocking if I need to be firm. And it shouldn't also be shocking at the same time that I choose to approach life with kindness, right? They both can be true.
When you look at how the Vikings are now with Kwesi in there and Kevin in there, and I don't badmouth the other iterations of Mike Zimmer. I liked Mike. I got along with Mike. Totally different personalities, different style, but there's also we're in a different time of life, I think, where you get these younger athletes that need a different way. And I hear it from everyone. People who've covered the team for a long time, Jim, you and myself, and some newbies, that this is like the nicest team. Like, they're good. Not like we've got, these sweet little boys running around. No, these are men playing a tough game, but they're good, kind men. Like, there's not a bad person in the locker room. I think it trickles down from the top after all these teams that I've covered in my life. I said, you go in there and you enjoy talking to these guys, even when you don't have to. That's kind of cool to say as someone who's at the top, right?
It is. I think you've said it really well. I think that's true of any organization. My observation is, of course, everything starts at the top, and you want to have role models and people that you emulate who have good characteristics, great leadership skills. But I definitely feel that there is a distinct difference. It seems to me that, it is consistent with the times. We can't just do everything, lead in the same way, do things like we did 10, 20 years ago in any industry, honestly.
Right.
But again, like we were talking about before, it is possible to be kind, caring humans and to have high expectations. These things don't have to be inconsistent, and not everyone understands that. But I firmly believe that both Kwesi and Kevin have very high expectations. And if you're clear about that, you communicate those well, you can still care about people and show compassion and kindness and have some fun in the process. And I think, that is a different part of the culture in the building, I think, that feels a bit different, is that there's, and even sometimes the players, without naming names, the people who just, when you happen to bump into them in the cafeteria, extending a hand, "Hi, I'm so-and-so.
Yeah.
Who are you? What do you do?" "Oh, I'm a lawyer here at the," that kind of thing. And I'm not even sure that happens at most teams, but I think that's really refreshing.
Very refreshing. I've heard when Cam Akers came last year, before he left and then came back, I was asking him, he goes, "This team is different." And I said, "Everyone says that when you're winning." He goes, No. I mean, I've been on a lot of teams and I've been on some teams. He goes, "Justin Jefferson came over, introduced himself to me. I was having a good, like a real conversation, not just say, hey, hi, and breeze by." And he said, "Man, that doesn't happen on other teams. The superstar does not come over and talk to the people who just got here. Because sometimes they don't even talk to anybody." He goes, and it's not just, and I've noticed it's not just Jets, it's everybody. He said, it's different here. And I do like that. And I was on Chicago's radio show and they said, "Oh, okay, so are you saying that Kevin O'Connell is like Eberflus? Because Eberflus he's just so kind and nice to everybody, but he doesn't lay down the law." I go, "Oh, no. I go, you even hear the guys say, they joke around that O'Connell has the dark side. They call it the dark side." I said, "He will say that will not happen again." And everyone in Chicago were like, "Really?" I go, "Oh, yes." I go, he treats them like men. And you don't yell, you don't dress someone down. But if you're going to treat each other like individuals, then you have to hold up your end of the bargain." And they're like, "Wow." Like in Chicago, they're like, "Can he come work for Kevin?" I'm like, "You just step back." You're not going to let that happen. But that is kind of nice to hear from other people on the outside, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You get a lot of questions about it. I do. I certainly from my colleagues around the league. And there's a lot of people that have been in successful teams. And, there's not just one way. There's not just one way to do this. But I think really understanding the organization, really understanding yourself. Like a leader is not going to be effective unless they can be authentic to who they are, he or she. And so if you're trying to be someone else, and I think that's where a lot of leaders, whether they're football coaches or they're CEOs or they're chief legal officers, whatever the role, you get goofed up when you're not being true to who you are. Yeah. And people can see that and they can smell it, and it almost never goes well.
Never.
And that was some of the, as an aside, some important feedback I got years ago that really helped me to grow. It shows the importance of, people being honest with you about when you may be stumbling and learning from it, but saying, "Karin, I feel like you're trying to be a leader like my boss at the time, rather than we feel like there's two different versions of you. There's you when I'm talking one-on-one and when you're in small groups. When you're doing the big stuff, we feel like it's not you anymore." And I had to really reflect on that. And I do think partly because maybe I wasn't quite yet confident that I was good enough, that I was, that I could be in that role. I was trying too hard to be someone else. So that's really stuck with me all these years.
Well, I know we have to wrap up soon, but what I do want to say is you are married to Mark Rosen. And before he even asked you on a date, Mark and I were having lunch. And he was like, "I have to ask you a question. And it's about someone, so I want your honest answer." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Do you know Karin?" I'm going to stop you right there. And I said, "Karin Nelson?" He goes, "Well, yeah." And I said, "She's a friend of mine. I adore her. I love her." I said, "So I defend my friends." I said, "So if it's not anything other than the moon sets on her," I go, "She's smart. She's kind of," he's like, and his face like looked at me like, goes, "Oh no, I want to ask her out."
I didn't know that.
Yes, because I was like, he goes, no, this is so great to hear. Like he just like beamed. He goes, no, I'm going to ask her out. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't say enough. He goes, obviously, you already were like, what? And I said, oh yeah, like, what did you hear? What? And he's like, no, like, I want to ask her out, and I think he's awesome. And so to be at your wedding, just knowing just how wonderful he thought you were, and that he was asking me like in confidence, like, do you know Karin? And I it's the qualities about you that really attracted him first. And now obviously you're married and it's wonderful. So for me to have like two people that I just admired separately as really good friends and have known for years beforehand, I kept thinking, I don't know why I didn't think of that, right? But oh yeah, he was like, "Girl, now I know who you are." You're like, if you're a friend, you're a friend. I go, "Oh yeah, I don't let like I heard this about so and so or da 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 or what do you know?" Like I don't gossip. I'm like, "Oh no." And he was like, "No, I love that. And that's exactly what I needed to hear." And I'm like, "Okay,
I'm so glad you shared that story with me."
Yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was such a good moment. But it, like my heart burst that he was like, "Oh my gosh." Like he was like a little kid. "No, I'm going to ask her out." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't say enough. I don't want to kill this moment for her. I don't want to like sell her too much." But yes. So I just think when you see two people that are individuals that come together that are so wonderful, that make just, a great partnership. That's what I said. I go, "Listen, I'm talking about my friend Karin today." And Mark goes, "Yeah, ask her questions because I don't even know what she does." So that's just been
I do
awesome.
think, and I know we're going to wrap up, I think it's very helpful at this stage of our respective lives that we both are very comfortable with what we do and what we've done, and we consider ourselves equals and partners in every way and support each other and are, really proud of each other for what we've done and what we're still doing. And that is a really important part, I think, of a successful relationship. And I'm grateful that we have that.
And I love seeing it on Sundays too. When we're up on our set and we're getting ready, because I'm on the set that first half hour and I'm waiting for you to come by, right? And I just love seeing the look in his eyes. He goes, "There she is. She's over in the corner there." And I look over and go, and I'm always like, "Look at her. Look at that outfit." And he's like, "Oh, she's just the best." He's just like beaming, but he knows like it's like the little tracker. It's like how you are doing with Stacy. It's like, I love your wife too. Like this stuff, I always say, I have, when people are like, "Oh, about relationships," I go, I have great examples. So for me, I'm single, but I wait for great. Because I see great.
Wait for great.
I just wait for great.
I waited a long time for great, and great for me, right? That's I think people have to know themselves and find the great for themselves.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I say, I love you, Mark, but he outkicked his coverage. Right?
So did I.
Yeah, right? You did too.
Yes.
You did too.
That's actually a good thing.
Yes, it is. How do you guys do it? Oh, because you know what? They don't need the 100%, the 80%. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah, I'll figure it out.
I'll figure out the rest. Karin, will you come back?
I would
there's
love
so much we're just
to.
scratching the surface. Like, it's just such an
really,
amazing
and
season.
I just want to say it's a true honor to be here with all of you. It really is. I think so highly of you, and it's fun to talk about these things, and I hope it's helpful to others.
Yes, I want other women to know, like, wow, I just don't have to go to law school or whatever.
Or you can.
But if
no,
they're
you
if there's something more, there's so many different jobs. I bet when you first started, oh, by the way, a little shout out, because you went to Mankato undergrad and then Iowa for law school. Right?
Yes, correct. And worked 3 years in between as a CPA, if you can believe. So
that's before you went to litigation, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then Seattle, and then here. I mean,
yes.
The moral to the story is, anyone listening, you have to put in the work, and you have to be honest to yourself. But it brings you to where you should be.
Yeah, I believe it has. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right.